You are listening to a Roamcast with Neil Kramer.
So you are the famous Simon Templar.
You're a very charming and gracious lady.
Oh, how nice of you to say so.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
Disquiet, uncertainty, disruption, falsehood, evil. A world teaching. A test of sovereign thought. What is real? Who can be trusted? How do we decide upon what is real? What are your authorities? What are the characteristics of a trustworthy person? Can you tell when someone is lying? Do most people think clearly? Do they feel deeply? Do they make the effort in themselves to cultivate discernment and wisdom so they may comprehend the mysteries of the world? How do we establish well-being? Do we find security and comfort in each other? In money? In food? In water? Clothes? Toilet paper? Batteries? Bullets? A house? A car? Electricity? Internet access? In the grocery store? In television? In our daily routines and habits? In warmth? In health and happiness, in culture, in the predictable, in preparedness, in pavements and gas stations and pizza, in mountains and rivers, in leaves on the branches. None of these are secure. They are all falling, all disintegrating. It is death to seek assurance and peace of mind anywhere in the fabric of the fallen world. There is no comforting continuity in that which is passing away. A whole dimension that is waning, corroding, degenerating by design. Yet this ceaseless decay is important. Part of the great teaching. Everything ending all the time. From our first day to the last day. Everything is always going. People, places, things. all going away, fading, turning to dust. Real calm, real composure, solid, unyielding conviction. They arise from the inward recognition that the earth is indeed an ephemeral classroom, not a constant playground, not made for our pleasure and amusement and fantasies. The earth was made for our education and elevation. Here we all are, in this enigmatic land, a domain sculpted out of nothingness for a reason. To teach, to test, a place in which every man and woman is called upon to demonstrate a number of qualities: love, humility, devotion, and two other necessary qualities that are often dangerously overlooked. Two rather innate qualities that nonetheless must be expressed in their fullness throughout life. And those are the qualities of trustworthiness and competence. These two virtues engender a wisdom, seasoned in heart and mind, from encountering and knowing three tiers, three levels of earthly manifestation: good and evil, right and wrong, true and false. Being able to discriminate one from another, to choose the right path, even when we don't need to. Even when the whole of mainstream life is, in fact, telling us not to. And yet we choose what is good and right and true at all costs. We are to be given dominion over a beautiful, immaculately transformed eternal realm, close to the pulse of divinity itself. To go there, we must demonstrate our trustworthiness and competence. Now, here. We must exemplify spiritual fruitfulness in all our days. Now, does that sound like a tall order? It isn't. So long as we are prepared to be honest. If we can promise that to ourselves, increasing, revelatory honesty, then our love, our humility, our devotion, our trustworthiness, our competence will be brought to bear in life quite admirably. We are made for these things. When we emanate these qualities, we prove how much we care. How much we care about life, about each other, about God. When we perceive honestly over the sum of our days, we reveal, we establish, and we attest to our trustworthy nature. We authenticate our competence in discerning the light and the shadow of reality. In these things, it becomes obvious that we cannot find peace in the illusory flux of a disintegrating world. Nowhere can we find safe harbour in its objects and locations and persons and elements and devices. Nowhere. We find peace in accepting the Maker's invitation to care deeply about life. This being meticulously embodied in our daily walk with truth. To heed the call, to listen, and respond. If we care in this way, if we enfold devotion to divine purpose into each hour, then we will have peace here and now. Truth in itself is a simple thing. You can define it in numerous ways, each fair and sound in their characterization. Truth is that which conforms to fact and reality. Truth is precise accordance with what is. Truth is the body of real things, actual events, genuine facts. Truth is the authentic nature and condition of something. Different people have different levels of access to truth, by way of their own abilities and commitment. And it is this variance of access that gives the impression to some that truth is relative, that it's elastic and subjective. And people who believe such things then come to feel that they can invent the truth for themselves, which is stupid. Truth is entirely independent of what humans think and feel. They don't make it. People do not make truth. We may come upon truth in our journeys through the desert, find it buried in the sand, or discover it like an oasis of cool, clear water. We may see it in the sky. We feel its echoes in everyday things. We may sacrifice much to know it, go through agonies and healings and hell to arrive at it. We don't make it. It was already there. Truth exists quite happily and quite perfectly, whole and constant, all by itself. It does not fluctuate. It is unbroken, total, universal, divine. Lots of people don't like that idea very much, that truth is independent of them and quite final and absolute. They don't like that at all. They're not happy with the notion that something might be true, something potentially very important that they don't like or don't know about. So they do a peculiar thing, people who don't like truth. They pretend for the whole of their life that truth is relative, that the immovable godly facts of life are quite accessible and editable by humans. They can be moved. They are ours to bend and twist and change however we wish. On all the big important things as well as the little things. And after many years of believing this kind of thing, such a person begins to live in a truth-avoidant manner, habitually. They avoid real knowledge about life like the plague. And this kind of socially acceptable truth evasion has become very normalized in mainstream society. Quite a conventional and even apparently respectable way to live. Over a long time, this avoidance habit may shift into actual animosity towards truth. The untrue person seethes and stews and boils inside. Sometimes their aversion toward truthful things is inaudible, unseen. and sometimes it is blaring and vicious. Either way, their acrimonious distortions are an attempt to smother truth with fantasies, excuses, contrivances, obstinacy. And this horror is quite approved and commended by mainstream culture. Most people think this kind of behaviour is okay. So, untruthful people must live in a negligent manner in order to preserve their untruthful logic, so they can go on blithely not knowing. Sad. They have no love or knowledge of godly things, the origins, purpose, the deep mysteries of this incredible life, these godly things. They don't care about that stuff. What they want is to just play in the playground, to remain unaccountable, to remain immature, to pretend the playground is constant and avoid all mention of it potentially not being a playground or constant at all. No sincere concern for anything other than themselves. Even their love for friends and family is contingent on it being convenient and pleasant to themselves. It is the saddest thing to see, to witness soul-endowed humans throw their spiritual commission into the trash can and willingly lose themselves in material degeneration. This is the goal of evil. Spiritually invigorated people are always in love with truth. It is their priority and passion. Above all else, they thirst for it when they are energized and inspired. And they thirst for it when they are exhausted and downcast. Up or down, full or empty, the same. The devotion does not fundamentally change. Truth transforms people, makes them new, shakes them, cleans them, uplifts them. If you love truth, you care about life. If you care about life, you will come to God. Learn about ways of knowing this incredible, mind-blowing, majestic being. Discovering his presence. Learning of his plans. Truth obliges people to become more honest in their day-to-day affairs and communications. Honest, with tact, diplomacy, grace, timing, consideration. Not like a bull in a china shop. To become, in oneself, clear, unaffected. We are gifted in these things, at our root. Though our society makes this all very tricky for the first 30 years. So we need to practice these skills, like a musician, or an archer, or a painter. The piano, the bow, the paintbrush. They are our instruments for change and beauty, ours to command. They can be instruments of transcendence and growth, or they can be frivolous diversions. Up to us. Reality is accelerating. The motion has the effect of lessening its concreteness. An ancient, illusory veil lifted permanently. If you can hear that buzzing, it's a large bee that's going about his merry business. A big, bright yellow and black fellow. Quite lovely to see, so we won't mind his noise for a minute, will we? The separation between the inside and the outside is now very minimal. It was always subtle, but now it's paper thin. The metaphysical world structure itself is shifting quickly. I feel quite emphatically that the 3D dimensional realm is becoming less solid, less temporally burdensome, less emotionally overcast. And this has both supernatural and natural properties and effects. The invisible source, the visible manifestation, closely bound. Cause and effect. Empire, right now, in spring 2020, for the first time in ages, is in real existential danger. Which is, of course, marvellous. Why is it in such peril? Because it is trapped in the 3D world. And that 3D world, our world, is beginning to phase shift into its final, short-lived developmental state. Empire is the human administration of a negative supernatural force. And there's much to say about that force. To simplify for now, one part of that force is demons. Yeah, demons. For real. Just as real as trees and mountains and traffic lights and bananas. Demons are real. They cannot assume a physical form without a human. So they groom a number of reliably corruptible human families and human organisations, human companies and institutes to operate through. And that's how we end up with Empire. They and it have been here for thousands of years, nothing new. Demons and their human empire are stuck here. They confined themselves here through their own impulsive wickedness and their malevolent obsession with the hypersensuality of physicality and all its associated depravities when it rampages morally unchecked. So they cannot go anywhere. There is no new world, no heaven for them, no other dimensional escape. They are wedged here in the 3D and its coupled astral plane. So if this 3D place goes down, they're in trouble. They are entombed here. For all their apparent power and fleeting dominion, they are nonetheless fragile in their imprisonment and will eventually face their own total annihilation, which they signed in their own lifeblood. How and why this came to be, theologically speaking, I can talk about some other time. And I'll say one more thing, one quite difficult thing about demons before we proceed. Demons need human sacrifice, like a car needs gasoline to run, or your lungs need air to breathe. They require the ritual killing, the slaughter of men and women and children, especially children, as a fuel source. And supernaturally, this is vital to them, not optional. As with old Canaanite sacrifice rituals to Moloch and other demons millennia ago, human beings brutalized and murdered as energetic offerings to those demons. And all this happening on a massive scale. And this process has, until recently, continued unabated. Now, it is being stopped. The term human trafficking is often employed in the place of the term human sacrifice, so as to spare the fragile emotional stability of normal people. But it's the same thing. And this sacrifice network is being destroyed. And this COVID-19 pretend plague is all mixed up in this. Across the world right now, you and I, and your friends and family, and my friends and family, are all witnessing the biggest global psyop since World War II. Let that sink in for a moment. We are experiencing, firsthand, the most internationally comprehensive, mass-scale psychological warfare tactic foisted upon people since 1939. Who are the controllers? Well, when you ask that question, things get complicated. So let's say evil tacticians and their agents, and good tacticians and their agents, totally opposing factions, each in control of various assets and technologies and weapons and histories and timelines and information, are all lying to us. All lying about what's going on right now. Some are lying to hurt us and protect themselves. And some are lying to protect us and eliminate the hidden enemy of empire. They sometimes call this lying for a positive eventual outcome, optics, in the military intelligence communities. And they do this at times to shield people from the nature of an enemy that most people don't want to think about. Something so foul, based on the sacrifice of human beings, supernatural, that the average punter would be off to the loony bin if they grasped the full magnitude of the situation. Especially the most important aspect, which is the supernatural, demonic aspect. Even without any of that, though, if you spend a few days dedicating yourself to diligently and meticulously examining the real independent data and credible research on COVID-19, you will conclude, as millions of rational, conscientious people already have, that the numbers don't add up. What constitutes a virus case, a virus death, or even how the virus is identified, tested and confirmed, all that stuff is well sketchy. And honest people trained in infectious diseases will tell you that those grey areas are often heavily exploited and abused by corrupt authorities and the mockingbird media to sway opinion, to control them. The mainstream media is an intelligence operation. And if you look at the virus data, it speaks for itself. It's not hard to corroborate and substantiate. But even if you didn't know anything about any of this, you didn't know how to research, how to collate objective, credible data for yourself, which is a skill everyone can cultivate, all you would need to do, if you're too busy for any of that, all you'd need to do is to look at the numbers, even the fake numbers. And what do they tell us? They tell us that proportionately, a tiny number of people are sick. most of them turn out okay. A very small number of them die, like they always do. And yet, in response to this unremarkable situation, the entire world has come to a standstill. And that stoppage has put society under tremendous pressure. And in some places that's being dealt with relatively well, and in other places not so much, depending on the population density and the tendency toward independent thought in the people. The whole response to the pretend plague is absurdly disproportionate to the problem itself. In fact, if no one had told us about it, I don't think anyone would have noticed either now, next year, or in 10 years. People get flu. Most do okay. A few die. Same as always. Sad. Fact. Most deaths are due to underlying health problems. A few are not. Same as always. And when you measure something a lot, you get more results than before you measured it a lot, when you measured stuff less. Like a police department that starts recording crime statistics in new, more efficient ways with computers and mobile devices and whatnot. And then that next year, the crime stats go way up. And if a mainstream news site reported that story, it would seem that things have got suddenly a lot worse. Crime's rocketed and, gone through the roof and things are terrible. But if you read into the story and delve into the body of what's really going on, you realise it's the measuring that's produced the result of something striking, not the actual situation on the ground. So the impact of this plague psyop, as I see it, has most people splitting into one of three groups. The first group, the good. This group of people believe that the cavalry are going to save us, and everything's fine, and the covert master plan is going ahead full speed, full control. The cavalry's here. The stealthy good guys have everything, all the intel, all the tech, all the good stuff, and the baddies are just totally screwed now. And now we just need to be patient and sit back and watch our computers and let things unfold. Something big is coming, and everything's going to be good. Game over. The second group, the bad. This group believes that we're all hopelessly doomed. This plague is just the last straw, the final nail in the coffin, and this sort of terrible cataclysmic pretext for complete social control by empire. That's what this is. And we're talking cashless society, deep state crypto, mandatory vaccines, chips, 5G, satellites, and just some bloody giant appalling transhumanist dystopian nightmare where human independence is just crushed. Game over. The third group, the ugly. This group is made up of really the biggest demographic, normal people. Normal people who, as ever, have got their head up their bum. And just don't know what is happening, really. Unless the BBC or CNN or some hideous website tells them. Or their president or governor or minister or whatever tells them what's going on and what they should do. And honestly, I don't know what we can do for these people. How can one accommodate those who have chosen not to think for themselves so chronically, so irresponsibly? And as you can see, if you look around, these people, somewhat predictably, just run neurotically around in various stages of outrage and suspicion and sanctimony and fear. Again, game over. All of these three groups, the good, the bad and the ugly, have two things in common. One is that they're all naive. The other is that they all place far too much weight on things outside of themselves. Things which are distant and man-made and unknowable, and potentially very disempowering. So the acolytes of these three groups are very easily deceived, and like lemmings, are apt to just march off the cliff at the right moment. The truth is, our salvation is 100% a spiritual matter. It's all between you and God. your own life and being and reason ought to be the primary means of establishing a deepening connection to reality. Your insights, your inquiries, your practices, your contemplations are the gold. Your daily walk with God is the only thing in the universe that will save you. Your authentic presence, your embodiment of goodness, your rugged independence, your profound love, your creative potency are what it's all about. Not some tripe from the good, the bad and the ugly crowds. You are the one to put the coronavirus in its proper place. You. The wholehearted path of spirit is close and knowable. Not out of reach, not distant, not hearsay from strangers on the internet. It is intimate, always with you, and you are in the driving seat. The three centres of human experience, heart, mind, soul, give us everything we need to know our divine work. If we learn to use them right, game on. The hunt is afoot. Can you allow yourself to feel what it is to be known and loved unconditionally by the creator of all life, who knows you personally, knows precisely who you are, all about you, every hair on your head, everything you ever got right, ever got wrong, every time you laughed, every time you wept, all the injustices and pain, all the triumphs and celebrations, everything. Can you accept the truth of this sacred relationship? Everything that truly matters here, everything substantial and precious, is found in relationship between oneself and God. As you present your inner being in all its pristine openness to the divine, loving creator that encompasses you, you will instantly gain a perspective that is life-changing. Less will bother you. You will be stronger. You will know more. You will love more. To the practical. If some good secret people are unravelling empire and helping return us to a more equitable and peaceful social state, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. And I think some of that is happening. Wonderful. We can definitely learn things about empire from good, mature, parapolitical commentators. I'm glad they're out there digging and sharing and pondering and broadcasting. They're doing 1,000 times more than the normal dipsticks. So we have to take our hat off to them, the good ones, not the nut jobs. And to have a good president, good military, good intelligence, good lawmakers, good everyday folk. Yes, of course, thank God. Thank God for them. The normal media consumers, thinking only the things beamed into their skulls and all the fake Hollywood claptrap and fake government advice and so on, the fake tech, all that reckless twaddle. Well, that is not a very good way to live. It's not very respectful, is it, of the great heavenly commission. Not a good choice. But they can forfeit their life if they wish. That's their business. And the doomers that fret over our impossibly bleak situation. Well, we are in the middle of spiritual warfare. It's true. Natural. And frankly, it's more dangerous than the doomers could possibly imagine. So intense is the supernatural conflict, in fact, that God had to come here in person himself, walk among us, a little while ago in order to bind the chief demon and thereby ensure we all had access to the Earth's multidimensional spiritual knowledge, embedded in reality itself, so good people can be transferred into light bodies when God concludes the 3D classroom and all matter everywhere is destroyed forever in a massive graduation fireworks display. This event itself ushering in a colossal dimensional one-way shift upward. That's some pretty important stuff right there. Hard to worry about Empire's flavour of the month mischief. Pointless. Their fate is sealed. So nothing that any of these groups are talking about, the cavalry people, the doom people, the normal people, none of it should in any way change your walk with God. Mark my words, the demons are on the run. They are starved and desperate. Empire is finished. Sure, there's some melodrama to come, but no big deal for eternal spirit warrior children of God. All untrue things dissolve in time. True things go onward.
If we are faced with a decision, a dilemma, how do we know what's right?
Our conscience will tell us, if we are prepared to listen.
A still small voice like the voice of God?
Not like Meg. Conscience is the voice of God.
But how can we be sure that it isn't our own voice we're hearing, our own subconscious desires? I mean, can we ever really break free of...
The devices and desires of our own hearts?
Yes. Couldn't it be our conscience just telling us just what we most want to hear?
I haven't found it so. My conscience usually directed me against my own desires.
Or what you thought were your own desires.
I have found it helpful to think of conscience as an instrument, let's say a stringed instrument. The message is in the music, but if we don't keep it in good repair and practice regularly, we get only an imperfect response.
But suppose my conscience tells me what's right, but if I obey it, I'm going to hurt someone else.
We must do what we know to be right and leave the consequences to God.
It's very hard sometimes.
I find life so complicated.
It is, unless you keep it in its place.
I thought I'd be used to it by now.
Well, I'm not a religious woman, but I found if you say no to everything, you can hardly tell the difference.
Life is something we're given as a test. I think I've failed.
Oh, no, of course not. No, you wrote a friendly letter to an old school chum, and you met. She was lonely, and you were lonely, and she asked you to move in with her, that's all.
You do understand.
I understand everything about lonely old ladies.
I can tell. You're very comfortable to talk to.
We reveal what we care about by our actions, by what we do, and by what we don't do. A lot of people say a lot of stuff about spiritual life. They dream and intend and plan and envision, and they talk about these things very confidently. And they dress the part, and they read the books and watch the videos. And even in their own private alone time, they tell themselves that they're into spiritual life. But very few, if any, of their dreams and intentions are ever brought into being. Because deep down, they don't really care about the rending renovation of actual spiritual labour. They don't have the belly for it. Their spiritual simulation is a posturing aimed secretly at self-protection and diversion, not pointed toward truth at all. We reveal our caring in what we do. Caring is the proven invincible failsafe in Earth's spiritual training syllabus. You can't fake caring inwardly or outwardly. You can try to, but it doesn't work, it doesn't hold. We are measured in how much we give a damn. How we bother to look into something, to think about it, feel it. Endeavouring, pursuing, suffering. People who care about life are honest and devoted to truth. People who don't care about life are dishonest and devoted to themselves. Our eternal state is substantially determined by our care in cultivating trustworthiness and competence, measured in heart and mind, invisibly inside, not in ostentatious deed or acclaim or false martyrdom or disingenuous charity, not in busyness or in productivity or in running from one unnecessary chore to another, not in academic performance or commerce or finances or status or celebrity, not in places visited, not jobs done, not goals met, not in those things, but rather in the honest contact with reality that comes from genuinely caring about what is true. Consider the lesson, trustworthiness. How can God trust a human who, of their own free will, chooses to live selfishly and disingenuously, where all life is essentially for their own amusement and comfort? A person who forsakes their quest for truth, which is God's teaching, and pretends they didn't hear the call, that they missed it. What are you talking about? What call? I didn't receive a call, so I can't be accountable. Not me. I'm a nice, decent, polite, productive person. I'm okay. God can't throw me into the lake of fire deletion vortex just because I didn't do anything. Can he? Just because I didn't bother about life. Just because I didn't think for myself and just sort of selected stuff off the lifestyle menu. Just because I allowed myself to forget. Just because I opted out. God wouldn't do that, would he? We bring things upon ourselves unreservedly. We judge ourselves. God simply sanctions and endorses the truth. No one missed the call. No one was privileged over another. We ascend or descend by our own will. We choose to go onward or choose to cease by ourselves. There is no middle ground. To be in the bosom of divinity or to be destroyed forever. To care or not to. When I say spiritual reality, I mean the real world and its divine purpose. The nested dimensional reality, its origin, design, nature, stages, purpose, and of course its maker, whose fingerprints and clues are everywhere. To have a genuine zeal for the real world and its divine purpose will inevitably have the effect of bringing you closer into some things and sending you away from others. Closer to other good people who are interested in spiritual reality at all levels. From the fresh-faced beginners to the salty old spiritual sea dogs. Wizened and windblown. Deep lines worn into their faces from decades of emotional carnage and mystical rapture. Those gorgeous beings, so beloved. And this very same spiritual zeal will, in time, lead you away from people who, perversely, choose to anaesthetize themselves by way of the alluring carnality of the putrefying circus around them. The holy classroom they have mistaken for a cheap resort. You were determined to appear on this Roamcast, Mr. B. I'm sure it's the same one, following me around. Like an old robin used to follow my grandfather's spade from one end of the garden to the other. It's hard. It's hard to lose some people. Hard to acknowledge the reality for many of our friends and family is that they don't care about spiritual life at all. Not a jot about what's really happening in life. And by association, sometimes they don't care about you, since you hopped over the fence and started caring yourself about life. That's a tough thing to say, and it's real. It's even disappointing to discover that some of our favourite musicians and authors and actors are so often totally spiritually impoverished in their own life. And some pretend otherwise, and some don't. And sometimes some of the more egoic ones among them become spiteful in their malevolence, malicious. They become lost in their own neglect. People who are not interested in truth. They've given up on the holy mystery, resigned, and they like being with other people who have resigned. Sad. Sad. When you think and feel deeply, when you learn how to live truthfully, you will suffer the grief of life. To feel all pain, all longing, all despair. And that is why most people don't do truth, because of these feelings, which they think might destroy them. Maybe they're right. To touch reality at its heart will place you inside a furnace, to be melted down into fiery, molten, elemental essence. Flesh and blood and bone gone. The primacy of self gone. Your life on fire. Priorities change. Where you are, who you're with, what you do, they change. The future changes. You start to remember the teaching, the classroom. Divinity is felt. You are not the you thought you were. You come to see that you are an agent, an emissary, an ambassador, an operator. You're on a mission, on duty 24/7. In all modes of being, you are the eyes and ears and hands and feet for a higher power. It's not all about you anymore. We are not all one. We are separated on purpose. You are not God. God is not you. You are tasked by Him in a great commission. You may be with Him if you prove trustworthy, if you care deeply. This makes life new. New feeling, new aspiration, new direction, pointing north. Your story, where you came from, what you did, what you have, what you thought it was all about, what used to be important, they don't mean the same anymore. A lot of it's hardly worth mentioning, quite honestly. What matters is the mission, the spirit that animates your soul. Truth destroys the world you used to live in, to make way for the real one. People who dedicate themselves to wisdom tend to feel the same way about many things. Over time, as you get to know a really wise and mature person, naturally, of course, you learn about the things that they like. Everyday things. About what books they like, what pictures, what landscapes, what music, what qualities in a person. What trees, what architecture, voices, accents, historical periods, theological ideas, everything. You get to know their tastes. And if you look carefully, you'll find that real practitioners of truthful living, from all walks of life, tend to like many, many of the same things. Surprisingly so. Strikingly parallel. And I've observed this with great interest over the decades. Why is that? How does this come to be? Why do the wise tend to like the same stuff? Because good is good. When you love truth, it affects all your choices. You go for what is real, what is sound and balanced, strong, beautiful, harmonious, effective, honest. And all of this filters right down to your own personal choices in everyday cultural life, into the sights and sounds and objects and crafts and the people and places that we like. I remember many years ago when I was a wee fledgling in an esoteric group, and we had a lecture one evening on spiritual art, like religious paintings and icons and that kind of thing. And when the lecture had finished, we all left the classroom together to socialise, to go and enjoy the evening with some nice drinks and whatnot, and cigars and laughter and enlivening conversation, as you can imagine. And a small group continued their discussion with the lecturer himself about art and beauty. And the question was put to him, rather a well-worn adage, as a matter of fact, that is it not true that beauty is in the eye of the beholder? And that's different for everyone. So surely, beauty is a very subjective and personal thing. And incredibly, our beloved teacher said, no, beauty is not subjective and relative and movable in that way at all. He told us that there are rules for beauty in spiritual reality: form, proportion, colour, expertise, context, relevance, truthfulness, emotion, poignancy, grace, elevation, empathy, transcendence, godly echo. And if a thing meets these standards, it will, in all likelihood, tend to be beautiful. And if it doesn't, then it will tend not to be. At that time, I had never imagined that beauty was somehow not subjective, which prior to had seemed a foregone conclusion. How provocative and astounding to say that beauty is totally objective, somehow absolute, the same for all of us, whether we like it or not. That there was some kind of supernatural external standard. Well, after maybe an hour's further discussion, I came to see truth here. I felt it was real, even before I'd properly corroborated it or had any experience of it. And of course I went on to test the idea for many years, road tested the hell out of it, made sure it was real, satisfied myself that it was solid. And it was. And I knew it would be. I could smell it then, even though it was so unexpected and strange. It is true. The pattern of beauty is inherent, God-given, in nature, in the elements, in man. And if we can perceive these patterns faithfully, skillfully, tenderly, we will partake in that prodigious beauty. Whether in a sublime painting, a lovingly handmade bowl, or the perfect innocence of a child's face, we see the love of God. We witness divinity in motion, bridging supernatural and natural, heart and mind, affecting us in truthful discovery, encouraging elevation. So as the old teacher said, a beautiful thing is a beautiful thing, whether you like it or not. When you have an absolute transcendent power, the immaculate loving creator who shaped this classroom to edify and uplift all of us, it is certain that his love will saturate every true thing. If we can harness our fears and desires, understand their roots and effects, and command new, higher conduct in ourselves, then we will, little by little, put down our protective illusions and realize the countenance of true being, divine in origin and destination, mortal and breakable whilst in our hands. In loving deeply, in living humbly, in seeking truth with all our heart, in these actions we consecrate our life in spiritual fidelity. In each and every day given to us, we welcome the great and holy commission to know spiritual reality. And in so doing, we make ourselves known as the trustworthy children of God. And all that is unholy trembles in our presence. And all that is good receives us in loving fellowship and gladness.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Roamcast. Neil Kramer loves you. You heard clips from the following: dialogue from the British 1960s TV show The Saint, starring Roger Moore; dialogue from the British TV show Devices and Desires; dialogue from the British TV show Open All Hours; dialogue from the British TV show Miss Marple; the songs Blackout and Incursion from the artist Vortex, shared under a Creative Commons license. You can find out more about Vortex from visiting the website vortex.com. If you liked any of those clips, support the artists and go buy their stuff. That's all for now. See you again soon. Until then, we wish you a beautiful day.
Mm-mm.